It's a beauty of a morning on the Hawkesbury River. There's not many people who can say they get to see a view like this on the way to work every day. Robbie Moxham does. Rob's farmed oysters here all his life, like his father, grandfather and great-grandfather before him. But they never had to deal with anything like Rob has in his decades on the river. His forebears didn't have to reinvent their entire business from the ground up like he's had to in the past few years.
They had their normal things they had to deal with. In far they had mudworm to deal with, and they had heat kill to deal with, and fresh water to deal with. But they never had anything as devastating or as final as the QX parasite.
In June 2004, a parasite called QX hit the Hawkesbury's Sydney Rock oyster crop, the only type farmed in the river. It wiped them all out, and with them entire family businesses. A 100-year-old industry, dead in the water. Some 60 farmers were left jobless. Many of them, like Rob, had never known another job.
Nobody knew what they were going to do in the future. They didn't know what the future held, whether we were still going to have an industry here or we weren't going to have an industry here, and you really needed time to figure out which direction you were going to go.
Many farmers shut shop for good. Some were too in debt, others too old to even think about starting from scratch. The farmers were drowning in uncertainty, and the local community was suffering too.
There was certainly it was in a pretty depressed state. But even the pub, they're taken down, the general store, the houseboat operators. There was just a general sort of depressed state of the whole township, really.
At what the farmers say was the 11th hour, the state government stepped in with a $2.7 million rescue package.
If we didn't get the clean-up package, we were going down to the steps of Parliament House and dumping a truckload of shell on the steps.
The government paid Rob to lead a small group of oyster farmers, like John, who wanted to stay to clean the old oyster infrastructure out of the water. The government also supplied them with hundreds of thousands of another breed of oysters, Pacific oysters, to rebuild their businesses with. John thinks the risk of staying around has paid off. He used to work for Rob, but since QX, he's branched out to start an oyster farming business of his own.
It's the way the Pacifics went in the river. I could see that, we could grow the Pacifics in half the time that we could the Sydney Rocks. And the quality of the product, I just thought, or in the back of your mind, it was a gut feeling really, that you could really make something of it.
Over the past few years, the oyster farmers have built new environmentally friendly infrastructure and bought high-tech equipment to grade the oysters. And some new investors, seeing an opportunity, have jumped into oyster farming. Just as the oyster farming business wasn't the only one in Brooklyn which was affected by the QX, it also hasn't been the only one which has had to reinvent itself because of the disease. Josh Smith's run the only oyster bar in town for the past 10 years. As his oyster farmer friends hurt, his business suffered and had to change completely.
Generally we were an oyster bar that had seafood, and now we've become a seafood bar that has an oyster menu. We had to basically change it from what it was to what it has become today, which was the natural progression of that business. But it happened more forcibly than we had anticipated.
The waters have calmed for Rob and the people of Brooklyn.
We're recovering. We've gone from a turnover of nothing 6 years ago when the QX hit to a turnover of around about $3 million worth of product. We've gone to virtually nil employment when QX hit to employing 28 full-time jobs in the industry. And in the future, the industry, the sky's nearly the limit.
So I asked Rob, will there be a fifth generation?
There's definitely going to be a fifth generation, and I wouldn't be surprised if there was a sixth generation.